All right, we took a few weeks off of the deep stacks, but we're back and we want to talk about Hauschka, who is an amazing artist that's combined a whole bunch of genres. He's kind of known for his prepared piano work, but also has a lot of overtones and similarities with electronica music. Played rock music as a kid. We were both just kind of giggling because I was looking through his Wikipedia page and he was actually a part of a hip hop duo. It was called God's Favorite Dog. They put out two songs called Love and Pain and Sway on Epic Records. I actually couldn't find them right off the bat. I think it might be a little bit buried in the realm of the internet somewhere. But the point being, he's an artist who spanned a lot of genres, which always interests me personally, and just super relevant, kind of contemporary. The album that I'm most into is called Abandoned City. It came out in 2014. There's also one we called A Different Forest from 2019. And he's done a record with the legendary violinist Hilary Hahn, who I'm also a big fan of and have been for a long time. And he did a really cool soundtrack in 2016 called Lion. But right off the bat, how would you, he's one of those artists that's a little bit difficult to describe. As soon as you kind of start stringing words together, you realize it's a little hard. There's a really cool video. There's a thing called the Boiler Room series on YouTube. And he has a live performance on there. If you type in Boiler Room in stereo and Hauschka, which is Hauschka. We'll have it all underneath there for you. But check that out because it really gives you an idea of what he does. He samples the piano. It's all very prepared. And then he has a little soundboard next to him. And as he samples it and loops it, he's also manipulating it with delay, reverb, all sorts of filtering. Anyway, it's a little bit hard to describe, but it's incredible music. How would you describe those albums, and what for you makes him stand out as an artist that's worth talking about?
I really like simply the sound of what he does. Some of those techniques that you described by watching the live performance on video told me more than I know, even though I've listened to these records a long time, these CDs, these recordings from Hauschka. And it's kind of a sneaky thing. The first few times I listened to one of his early ones, I didn't really read anything. I just put it in. I'm just like, oh man, this is really cool. It kind of creeps up like, well, that's prepared piano. I know what that is. It's a really neat technique that a number of people have messed with over the years. And it's kind of a signature sound for him, although he's grown it and collaborated it sonically and, meshed it and threaded it with so many other neat sounds. But like a lot of things in my world, a promo shows up at the store and I look at it and I think, oh, this looks like something I'd be into. And I try it and I'm just like, oh. And at that time, of some of the one that first caught my attention was Ferndorf, which was, I think, 2008. And I immediately loved it. To me, it sounded like some kind of postmodern chamber music that I was really enamored with and was actually kind of seeking the sound in my wanderings musically and recordings and stuff, and had begun to discover some of these artists that I sort of associate together, although they're not really clumped as a group or collective, and I don't want to offend any of them. They're not necessarily associated one way or another, but in my listening journey, they all showing up about the same time. And I'm referring to Max Richter, Johann Johansson, Olafur Arnolds, Nils Fram, these guys, and largely from Germany and a couple of them from Iceland. And they're just this whole sort of amalgam of sounds coming out of this group of artists. And Hauschka is one of the shining lights of this whole herd of contemporary artists, in my opinion. And I love the journey that he's had from what is a fairly big catalog now at this time. And I just love what he does. I guess it's circling back to the answer to your question.
I think something that interests us both. I'm a huge fan of music that's just really well done in one tradition, like just a great contemporary soul singer or a great contemporary bluegrass band gathered around one mic. I have a special place in my heart for that. But by the same token, and on the flip side of that, what really lights my fire, I think, is artists who kind of do forge their own path and are maybe really combining contemporary as well as older techniques. So some of his music sounds very much like romantic kind of German classical music, a little bit of Chopin, a little bit of kind of Beethoven, or then again, by the same token, like you're saying, there's also kind of elements of the classical composer Steve Reich, where it's something that starts very, very simple, but then gradually over each cycle of kind of a loop gets bigger and bigger and more complex, and then it kind of begins to morph, and then 6 or 7 or 8 minutes later, it's this like whole other thing kind of. Seeing him live is really cool. And I thought this thing that there's a quote here that we were talking about that I'll just read really quick that was from Pitchfork that kind of really sums it up. It says, an inspired reverse engineering of house and techno fundamentals, replacing the music's familiar circuitry with steel wire and felt pads. That's a pretty good way to put it, especially the Abandoned City album. It kind of sounds like it very much has like a 4 on the floor, like almost like a club beat, and he's taken some of the lower strings of the piano and dampened them so it kind of sounds almost like a pitched kick drum or something. I don't know. I think it's super universal in that I've actually been running to some of his music, exercising. It's kind of a beautiful, energetic space to be in. It's just great for so many things. It also, and I mean this in the highest form of praise, it also kind of sounds like really, really classy, like video game music in a way. It's like it really transports you someplace, and it's very energetic and very distinctive. And there's also an edge of tension and something kind of threatening. It's a little spooky sometimes, even. I don't know. I think it's fascinating. One of the other amazing things that I heard about him that I just thought is brilliant, as I was reading through some of the comments online about his music and stuff, it seems to be that one of the most common things that he does at his shows, this blew my mind. I can only imagine how beautiful and incredible this must be, is he comes out and starts his show just kind of, I've seen him do this on the internet, where he's almost just banging on the piano like he's sort of like childlike, and it's making all these sounds like boom, bop. It's like, and it's just totally messy. He's got stuff hanging off the piano. It's almost like performance art. And he starts doing this thing, and then he starts manipulating it. And then at the end of the show, after an hour, 70, 80 minutes, he over the course of maybe 5 minutes during a piece, he pretty much removes all the prepared stuff. And then he ends the show just with this pristine, unprepared piano. And then it's like kind of the last song, walks off. And what I love about that, and what epitomizes him as an artist, and something that I love about artists in general that I really admire at that level that we try and do in the deep stacks, is he relies on very clever, simple, timeless ideas and tactics. It's like, oh wow, that's a simple idea, but from a performance perspective and musically, it's brilliant. It almost would be just, I can imagine what it would be like to go and see him perform like that, and then end that way. It would be breathtaking. But it's so simple, and everything about his music is kind of like that. It's kind of like what these quotes are saying. Rarely, the only last thing I'll say before I pass it back to you is, rarely am I so drawn to an instrumental artist. I think even my hip hop buddies, not unlike his roots, would dig it. Like the guys I know in town that are hip hop producers, they should be sampling this or checking it out or replicating it themselves originally. Like, put your winter coat on the piano and sample. I mean, like, just his creativity is so boundless. It's so inspiring for me as an artist, and as a listener, like you say, it's hard to tell what he's doing. Sometimes it sounds like an electronic record. Some of it is, but it's also classical music. I just love how perplexing and complex it is, and yet everything about it is rooted in just simple ideas. It's not pretentious. And that's the last thing I'll say too, is he doesn't really ever shred on piano, even though I've heard a few things where he kind of can, but it's very unassuming, will be a good word for it too. It's very just kind of meditative. He doesn't just start like going crazy. It's very intricate and kind of virtuosic in its execution, but it's not like bombastic or like he's trying to impress you about how great a piano player he is per se, you know.
I come at it from a slightly different aspect. I'm no expert and have no real deep interest in the electronic music, dance scene, that whole thing. My thing is I'm enamored with this in the biggest sort of way, coming at it from a sort of a classical fanatic. When Hauschka gets into these little rhythmic, repetitive, looping sort of patterns and stuff, I hear that Philip Glass thing going on, and you're right. It's just so enjoyable because you get into this rhythmic thing, and he's doing his whole sort of Hauschka rhythm, minimalist, whatever, inventive moments. And then the next thing you know, we're sort of in a little piano soliloquy, and it's solo, or there's a cello going along with him on some of these recordings. Like, I find that tremendously just enthralling. I just love that technique of the music rising and being rhythmic, and then relaxing and being piano and more intimate moments on the same path across a whole CD or record. I also really like that he's gone his own way. You kind of touched on this, and that's what I like about these other guys I mentioned earlier, is, it's sort of the era where it's the internet and the global pan, whatever, everything, we don't have to be, this is classical, this is rock, this is electronic music, what's the next official genre that this progress is on. It's just, this is music that Hauschka and some of his compatriots have developed or landed in through their work and their inspiration. And I really, really dig that, because we can never be Beethoven again. Beethoven lived in the early 1800s. We can't do that again. And Radiohead's already done what Radiohead's done, and they broke a lot of ground, with, is this drone? Is this rock? Is this electronic? Is this avant-garde? What is this? And they did that whole thing, and I love people that sort of just do what moves them and then create unknowingly or intuitively this whole new thing. In this case, Hauschka's developed Hauschka, and Max Richter developed his whole world, his whole sound world. But it comes from places. I mean, it's got whatever, French Impressionists and Eric Satie and John Cage and all these different things, and the minimalists all in it, and the dance scene and electronic and all in it. But it's 100% Hauschka, and it's just a beautiful thing, I like breaking down the barriers, people in the classical side of the world where I live in my head and in my listening in my collection so much. They're all worried about what is this and what are the influences, and is this classical or is this not? I don't give a crap. This is really amazing. I would call him, magical chamber music for the postmodern age, because to me, that's what it is. I don't know what he thinks of it is. It's probably just my music, but it's really, really amazing. And I like the journey he's gone on. There's a couple of first early recordings I don't even have access to. I haven't found them or paid for them on the internet as yet. But an early one called Room to Expand was very simple, very pristine, almost austere. And then Ferndorf kind of took that and, what do you call it, burnished it or matured it slightly. And then he went into Foreign Landscapes, and he worked with the Magic Orchestra, which was the Hauschka effect, if you will, interacting with the modern chamber music orchestra with strings and winds in just a beautiful way. It just rolls on forward to What If, and now to me, What If is the sort of quintessential apotheosis of what he's been working on. It all the elements have just matured and just turned into beauty and come together in that record. And then the latest one is a solo piano thing. It's almost like a full cycle or a new side track that he has enjoyed the 2019's Different Forest. I love that. It's so
Yeah.
nice. And film scores, I haven't really discovered all those, but that's my next journey with Hauschka, is to dip into the film scores. I love film scores. You know that because we've talked about that. I hope we'll do some other deep stacks about film score stuff.
Yeah, it seems his most widely known tracks currently, at least in the digital realm, are from a film called Lion from 2016.
Okay.
The theme of which is what I would describe as sort of achingly beautiful, like romantic piano song. It's very short. It's like 2 minutes and 20 seconds or something. I also love this quote we talked about from Mojo magazine that kind of nails it. It says, it's being him, as infectious and disarming as it is genre defying, which is kind of what we're trying to say. I mean, it is very infectious. It's one of those things I can see it being listened to or used in so many spaces. It is great film music. I mean, that's instantly apparent. Just because it creates such a space. It's kind of hard to get to describe with words, but it really transforms you. And the overtones, especially for kind of a generation that grew up with hip hop and electronic music, is pretty apparent too. Like these critics I mentioned have been saying, and that we also can hear, just the way that it kind of builds and expands. The classical composers that you mentioned, like Philip Glass and Steve Reich and Max Richter behind you. There's a John Cage back there I see as well.
Yeah.
Are all in his family tree. I just love how masterfully he presents it in a very palatable, universal kind of form. It's what he says about infectious and disarming. It is very listenable, even though it's also very original and creative. And that crossroads, as we wind down here, is kind of really the essence of what interests me about him, is the fact that it's profoundly contemporary and original, but also just very universal and listenable. I feel like people who are into classical music probably could potentially enjoy a lot of what he does from a more pure perspective. The Hilary Hahn record is really cool.
Yes.
But like I was saying before, my hip hop producer buddies, I think, would be totally inspired and blown away to kind of check out what he does live, and what he does in terms of samples and preparing the piano is really cool. And yeah, I just love it. Like I said before, I've been running to it. It's really great meditative music, and it really takes me to a different place. And I also, like a lot of folks, I know you're this way too, from working in the record shop all day. I sometimes really long for music that is a little bit less, it's a little bit just that's instrumental and isn't really coming at me, for lack of a better word. Like, it's not some shredder album where the jazzers are all just playing like an 11/8 and doing all this stuff. Like sometimes when I run and stuff, I want something musically that's more just kind of like a Rothko painting, as opposed to to use a painter's reference, just a little more open, kind of not trying to tell me what to think or feel, and not in such a hurry. Most of his songs are about 5 minutes or longer, so they're not long like classical pieces. Like, they're shorter than a piano sonata probably, but longer than a regular singer-songwriter song. But I guess in closing, what else do you, for someone who maybe has never heard Hauschka before, that again is his stage name. I wasn't bold enough to try and pronounce his proper German name or whatever, but what would you suggest? I mean, I personally love Abandoned City. I would check that out first, or the Boiler Room series on YouTube was really cool. I was totally just like fixated on that. But what are your closing thoughts on Hauschka? I mean, he's such a fascinating artist. I would love to go see him live sometime. My ultimate dream would be to produce a track with him. I kind of wonder why, like someone like, and this is shout out to another of my favorite artists, like Odyssey, or one of the superstar hip hop artists like Kendrick Lamar. So I mean, can you imagine how cool and ridiculous that would be? I can't even imagine. It might have already he might have already done tracks for some of those people and just
Yeah, they
I
did
don't
it.
know about it, but
We just don't know it yet. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd also like, I don't know if they know each other, if there's any kind of whatever, artistic offstanding, but I would love to see a recording of Max Richter and Hauschka work together. Maybe one CD or record of piano and keyboard based duos and interactions, and then one where they're bringing their chamber music, vibe or compositions together. Nils Fram and Olafur Arnold did one of those. It was really, really enjoyable. But I wanted to touch on a thing you mentioned on just a moment ago about I really, in most of my listings, crave that music that doesn't, invade my space. I get to go live in it and with it. There's so much bandwidth beaming at me, at us, at anybody these days: the radio, the internet, the headlines, the noise, the job, the whatever, people talking to you all day if you're out there on a job or doing stuff or what. When I listen to music, I want to go inhabit that place. I want to, open up the can, so to speak, and just go float and enjoy and drift or flow in it. I don't want to know the words necessarily, and that because that's somebody speaking to me. I listen to this kind of music and other kinds that do this for me so much that I hear Hauschka's voice in his music. When I listen to Philip Glass, I hear that. When I listen to Brahms, I hear that. I don't need words in English coming at me, or I love Johnny Winter, or, with the rock and blues thing at me, which I do love in the car. But in this case, I'm really enamored with music that's instrumental, or the vocal aspect is either in a foreign language or is in a way that is very subtly threaded through the music, where I can go inhabit the space that they're offering to me. And I hear the voice and the sounds and the chords and the notes. And that's what I love about things like Hauschka. And that's what I'm so glad that he has brought to us for these, dozen or more recordings that we can all go to. Anybody should jump in, go get Ferndorf, Foreign Landscapes, What If, any of them, and just turn them on, put on headphones if you like, and just get lost.
Yeah, well said. I mean, thanks for all the inspiration to Hauschka. And if you aren't already familiar with this music, definitely check it out. It's definitely an example of a truly distinctive contemporary artist's voice intersecting with something that is very listenable from whatever angle you're coming at it from. So definitely we're checking it out, all his music. And thank you, Hauschka.
Thanks for checking out our weekly web series, Deep Stacks, brought to you by Big X Music, a conversation each week with my dad, 40-plus year veteran of the music industry, founder of Horizon Records and concert promoter, where I sit down and we talk together about the music we're listening to. Please subscribe, leave us a comment down below, and join the conversation.